All right, my name is Laura Gifford, and I am doing the presentation tonight. I am a marketing consultant for the Laramie Group, and I also do consulting for the Shippensburg Small Business Development Center, which is how I got connected with Cheryl and the Capital RC&D organization. So we put together this marketing presentation for you guys, and we tried to really cater it to small ag businesses with the idea that we know that you are very busy during a good portion of the year, and marketing is something that I'm sure you're aware of and that you want to do, but don't always get around to having the time or budget to do so. So we're hoping that these tools give you an opportunity to really wrap your head around what goes into a marketing plan and be able to develop a plan that you can work on in the off season that is easy to execute and feasible for these types of businesses during your busy season. So what the presentation will go through is the content that will actually go into that plan, and what we will follow up with after the presentation is an actual plan template that you can take and utilize the information that we put together throughout the presentation and come up with a marketing plan that will hopefully take you into next year and help you better utilize your time and your resources for marketing your business. So as I mentioned, I do some marketing consulting work for the Small Business Development Center. We are a unit of about 18 centers throughout the state that provides support services to small businesses. And by small, that means anyone that has less than 100 employees that is a for-profit business throughout the state. The state and the federal funds actually fund these programs, and the consulting and the services from the programs are free to all state businesses that are eligible. So I think it's a program that not a lot of people know about, that it is available, but it is available to all businesses that qualify, and it is a great resource to get. We do a lot of business consulting for new businesses that are coming in and trying to do business planning, financial projections, marketing plans, EMAP consulting, trademark, patenting, all sorts of stuff across the board. And we also work with a lot of existing businesses that are looking to grow or that are in kind of a troublesome state. We do work all across the board. So I included a link here on the presentation if it's something you'd like to check out, what services they provide and what center your business is located in. So depending on which county you're located in, there's different centers that service those areas. Shippensburg obviously covers a lot of central southern counties. Some of you might also be closer to Kutztown or to some of the Lancaster locations. So you can take a look at that map or even check out the SBDC website for that. I'm going to hand over this one to Cheryl to talk a little bit more about Capital RC&D.
So Capital RC&D is a nonprofit organization that primarily operates in the 7 counties of South Central Pennsylvania, but also gets to operate statewide for certain programs. We do high tunnel support for individuals that have used USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service funding to acquire a high tunnel. We never limit our educational opportunities to folks that have only used those services. So I can make sure that anyone that's doing direct marketing has access to anything we put together for them. We also do a lot to support local food in our region. One of the best ways to ensure conservation is to make sure that the people that are implementing conservation practices are able to make a living. So that's part of our goal, and as you know, part of that, we're able to bring this program to you today. So there are resource conservation and development councils throughout the state. If you're not in the South Central region and you're interested to learn more, please visit parcd.org. And there also, I know there are several folks from out of state participating today. So they are also available nationally. There's a national organization that can help you find your local council. So, Laura, thank you.
We're going to start off with some general information about marketing, because I think there is some misconceptions about what actually goes into a marketing plan, and it's somewhat generalized. So I'm going to go a little bit into detail about that before we get into the content of your plan. So when we talk about marketing, we talk about a process that is needed to discern customers' wants and desires, and it focuses on your product or service to meet those desires. And that's just the idea that if people don't want or need it, they're not going to buy it. And I think that's just a general definition of marketing. And then it's also the idea of creating the customer wanting your specific product or service, and that's what's really fundamental to your business's growth. So unless you pay attention to what your consumers' demographics and desires are in the long run, usually businesses don't stick around, and that's just because that is a dynamic thing with consumers. It doesn't stay static throughout years. It tends to be seen as a creative industry because of a lot of the design work and the branding, but it also deals a lot with research when you talk about customers' future needs and the emotional appeal of those. I use the sizzle, customers buy the sizzle, not the steak, and the sample that there are hundreds and hundreds of steakhouses, but you'll find ones that are much more appealing despite the fact that it may not have a different steak, they just have a better marketing campaign and appeal to their customers. The basics that go into marketing are the areas that are outlined in the next slide, and it's the process of creating or reorganizing your business to be successful in selling a product or service that people not only desire but are willing to purchase. So different areas include the traditional advertising and branding, different types of communications, database and direct marketing, social media, which is a big piece of what we'll be talking about today, events, face-to-face type of things you can reach your consumers, internet marketing and websites, promotions, market research, public relations, which has a lot to do with reaching out to news outlets and stories and that kind of thing, search engine marketing and search engine optimization, which is obviously a large thing to today's society with websites and people Googling and finding your information in your website, and project management. So there's a lot of different pieces that will go into your marketing plan. You may not use all of these. You may only use some of them, and that's totally fine. I just like to outline all of them because these are the different things that will go in, and if you choose not to do one, that's fine, but it is something that to consider. The first piece that we're going to talk about for your specific brands is obviously your brand. A brand is a name, a term, a design, a symbol, or other feature that distinguishes your product or service from other competitive offerings. These brands will really create loyalty with your consumers, recognition. It creates an experience, an emotion, a feeling. It isn't something that necessarily defines exactly what you provide. I like to say that because sometimes a product or service starts out as one thing and develops into a whole line of products or services. Or it may start out as something and morph over time and it doesn't even provide what it first did. So we like to say the brand is more of an overall umbrella as opposed to any specific product or service that you offer. I put some recognizable ones here that are obviously international and some local ones that are pretty recognizable because they have created strong brands. So we talk a little bit about Starbucks because Starbucks obviously started as just coffee, but they have an unreal amount of products now, and people recognize it solely from the green circle. It doesn't say Starbucks, it doesn't say coffee, it doesn't say any of that. It's literally just that green circle logo. Apple is obviously a huge one. McDonald's with the arch. Those are much bigger market things. But we also talk about Spiral Path, which is a local farm and a CSA provider, and they've done a really good job with their branding, as well as Hanover Foods. The CRC&D also has a Growing Green series available, which is some fact sheets and some marketing pieces that you can put your own logo and brand on and create some pieces of your own that they've worked to pull together so you can create some branded pieces. So when we do the follow-up after the presentation, Cheryl will provide some of that information. Coming out of your brand, there are 4 pieces of the marketing plan that we're going to go through one at a time to help collect some of your content for your marketing plan. For a marketing plan to be successful, a mix of all 4 Ps must reflect the wants and desires of your consumers. So we're going to talk about your product, your price point, the place, which is the distribution channel where it's going to be available, and then the promotion is kind of the more subjective side of it, the advertising, PR, word of mouth, internet stuff, and then that channels go into that. Starting with the first one is product. So if you have a piece of paper or even just on your computer, or you can do it in your head too, what I like to start out with is to outline a background and a brief description of your product or service. So we're going to talk a little bit about if you are a local farm that provides produce to consumers in, you know, in Cumberland County, and you provide fruits and vegetables. I like to say a general description, not anything specific, not we provide tomatoes and onions, you know, like the picture says. I like to keep it a little bit more broad about who you are, what your product or service is, and who it's geared towards. And then after that, you're going to describe some of the attributes of your product or service that are different from other similar product or services or your competitors. And that's going to go a lot into what your point of differentiation is. And this is a big selling point for your business. The point of differentiation is going to end up crafting your brand and your message and the message that goes out into your channels. So the point of differentiation may be, for some companies, the price point. You may have a very similar product to your competitors, but your price point is much lower, so you are the bargain or the inexpensive brand. Some brands really pride themselves on the fact that they are premium, 100% local or organic, and the price point may be higher. Your point of differentiation is not the price, it's going to be the quality. Some people's point of differentiation may be that it's widely available and it's easy to find in many different outlets throughout the area, or it may be the opposite, that it is very unique and it's kind of hard to find, and it's popular because people don't have as much access to it. The point of differentiation for each business is going to be different, but that's what you want it to be. You want to be able to find a piece of your brand that sticks out from all of the others. I put a note on the bottom here about the competitive analysis. This is something that can be extremely detailed. You can outline all of your competitors, price points, points of differentiation, and in a big competitive analysis, and really get a big snapshot of what your market looks like. That's something that can be developed for individual businesses such as yourselves through the SBDC or the capital RC&D, but it is something we like to do either on a one-on-one or a very small group basis because it gets into a lot of detail and it's time consuming. So I mention it here, and if it's something that you're interested in pursuing and looking into, we can certainly follow up with you guys individually on that. So once you have a good idea of the product or service description and an idea of your point of differentiation, that gives you a good content for the first P, which is product. The second P is going to be price point. So determining a price point that is in line with your product or service and the attributes that you described under the product section. Different products are going to fluctuate, so keeping that in mind is always a good thing, but definitely keeping in mind your location as well. Just with any other industry, different areas have different costs of living, and different products will go for different price points. So it's good to keep in mind that if you are available across different regions, maybe you will have multiple price points. If you're available only very locally, then it may be a little bit simpler. I use this sample down here with some of the produce to give you a better idea of how you might outline some of your competitive analysis. Now, part of the point of differentiation may come into play here. If you are positioning yourself or your brand as the bargain brand, then obviously you want to be at the lower end of the comparative price points. If you're positioning yourself as premium in the high end, you want to swing to the other end of that. You want to be cautious of being the cheapest or the most expensive, because those are hard selling points, but you'll have a better idea of where you're going to fall in that range. If you always want to be at a higher price point than one of your competitors, this is a good place to outline that, or vice versa. If you always want to be 10 or 20 cents cheaper than your competitor, that's a good place to outline that as well. And making sure you're flexible with market fluctuations and outside factors is always a good thing. I like to use the example of the citrus price differentiation. I think it was 2 years ago with the cold winter in Florida. Everybody's, citrus was not widely available, is very expensive, and so fluctuations like that you can account for, but this will be more general price point. We are going to, at the end of this slide, open it up for discussion. So if there's any questions that you have through this slide, we'll open it up and talk a little bit about this touch point slide and any questions you have going forward. The third P is for place. Place is going to be where your product or service is available to consumers, or where your product or service is going to interact with potential consumers. So I put a sample touch points visual here. In the email that you received prior to this webinar, we sent you a PDF of a blank touch point. If you have that available or printed out, you can certainly jot on that. You can do it on your computer. It's something you can follow up with later and work on it then. But what you want to do is you want to put your brand or product or service in the center, and then try to fill out every single one of the gray circles around it to come up with different places that your brand will interact with potential consumers. You want to keep in mind that your target audience may have a specific lifestyle that they come across in different areas. So I like to use the example of, if you have a consumer base that is very active and likes to get outdoors and do fitness, then maybe even though your specific product or service isn't available at, say, your local 5K or community race, maybe that's a good place to consider for a potential channel that you could reach out and get your brand in front of people there. And once we fill out these touch points, this is actually going to become a list of potential channels for your marketing plan. So the sample I have in here, I put together just to keep a small produce farm in mind. So the idea that they're going to have some traditional marketing outlets that they utilize, their website, they have a Facebook page, if they participate in the local farmers market, if they are providers for produce for local restaurants, if they're at community events, social media like Pinterest or Instagram, if they do provide some produce for local grocery stores, and then obviously there's also some traditional channels like TV, radio, and customer service should always be on here, because that's going to be that personal interaction with your customers. If somebody has a question, if somebody has a request, if somebody has a problem, that they are able to reach out to you and get in touch with you personally or with your company. So I want you to take a couple minutes to take a look at your touch points, jot down a few ideas. We are going to open up the line here in a moment for discussion. If you have questions, if you have ideas about this, if you want to run something by us, please feel free to do so in the next minute or two.
Laura, I'll ask a question if you don't mind. How often should you reevaluate the touch points?
So I think that using this to do your annual plan is great to pick and choose a couple of these options for your plan. And when you go back to the drawing board next year, maybe you do an annual plan. I say an annual plan is good for existing businesses. New businesses, we usually do about 6 months, because it's hard to predict how things will roll out. But if you're an existing business, annual plans work out really well. And I think that coming back to this touch points slide and editing it each year is a good place to start before you actually start working through the plan. So you can say, here's the touch points I came up with last year. I utilized these 6 of them. 4 of them worked out really well. 2 of them, not so much. We're going to throw those back into the pool, pick 2 other ones, or maybe take those 2 out and put 2 new ones in and have a new pool to choose from. It's a great place to also put options here that if you have other avenues approach you throughout the year saying, we'd really like you to advertise in this community publication, we'd really like you to participate in this event. It gives you an option to throw that into this pool and consider it for next year, and be able to say to people, we've chosen our marketing tactics and our budget for this year, but if you can provide some information, we'd be happy to consider to participate in next year. So it's kind of like your little pool of options here.
Okay.
So in short, I would say annually is a good time to revisit these types of options.
Great.
All right, so I'm going to keep moving here. So from those touch points, we're actually going to develop actual channels for your marketing message and your brand. So we're going to take, say, for example, the farmer's market. It's something you want to participate in every week, and you want to not only have your product available there, but be able to have some sort of takeaway for those people. So I put the water bottle in here. I think branded and wrapped water bottles are pretty popular during summer months. I know with some of the ag industries, the reusable totes are pretty popular because they'll use those at different events, and it's something that your brand is on that people will carry around and other people will see and ask about, and hopefully it becomes a talking point. And utilizing those channels and really crafting your brand and message to help reach those targeted customers is where the biggest bang for your buck is going to be. And again, I'll reiterate, knowing your target audience and their lifestyle will help you build the touch points and identify ways to reach your customers and potential customers. The last P is for promotion. So the channels that you developed through your touch points do not necessarily have to be expensive to be effective. I really like to point this out for small businesses because I think a lot of businesses think, I would really like to do more marketing, but I don't have the budget for it. I can't spend thousands of dollars to do these traditional ads or to do these materials. And I like to really point out that that is not how small business marketing works. Taking some of those touch points and channels and determining ways to really reach out to your potential audience in inexpensive ways, even at the same exact place, is a great thing to do. A lot of people with events, like if they have an event that they want to participate in but it's expensive, maybe they just go to it the first year. They go, they kind of be a brand ambassador, they bring giveaway stuff, they walk around, they talk to people. I think sometimes your presence is the most important thing at those types of community events. And utilizing any event or any blog or guest blogging may be a good option for you. Some of the social media options are free or very inexpensive. They're just time consuming. So really coming up with ways to utilize non-traditional channels and keep it in a budget friendly manner is really what the idea of this webinar is meant to make sure that you are utilizing your best time and energy and money. So portioning out your marketing efforts over the course of your year so your most effective channels are utilized. I like to focus on that because I know that a lot of the ag producers are going to be extremely busy during the spring, summer, and early fall months. So your marketing efforts may really focus on a little bit before and the beginning of those, and a lot of your time and efforts going to be just execution throughout the rest of the year. And then your off season will be spent, planning for the following year. So you really want to have an idea of portioning them out over the course of your season, but really focusing heavily on when you're pulling people in. For example, if you have a CSA, obviously getting people to sign up for that CSA in the off season and the early season is when your efforts are going to need to be focused. And then your marketing efforts and your budget is going to shift then. After you get that all set up, it's going to shift to the events that you're maybe participating in throughout the year. And maybe then it also shifts into some of the social media and the website piece, that when people see or hear about your brand through other customers, that they can then refer to you, and you can collect some of that information or some contacts through social media or at events, get some feedback, and then those people then can be really targeted at the end of the year for the following year's efforts. I also made a note on number 3 here that you can work on a return on investment worksheet. Just like the competitive analysis we talked about before, this is kind of a detailed oriented worksheet that will outline all of the channels that you decide on for your plan. It'll then portion out how many impressions you get from that particular channel, what that channel cost you, the cost per impression, and it'll portion out all of this stuff so you can really visualize in a number format what you're getting for your money. Some of the events will be expensive, but maybe you reach a lot of people and have a lot of sales or get a lot of feedback from that, and it makes it worthwhile versus an event that's free, but you're getting very little from it and you're just spending a lot of time on it. So I think it helps people visually sort out what's working and what's not working and what's worth it and what's not worth it, because sometimes the expensive stuff is worth it and sometimes it is absolutely not worth it once you do the math and kind of see how it compares to your other channels. It is a worksheet that does all the calculations for you. So just like the competitive analysis, if it is something you are interested in working through when you develop your marketing plan, we can do so with you one-on-one and help talk through it, or in a small group. We will follow up after this webinar and see if it's something that people are interested in going through in detail. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, it is really important, especially for small businesses, to set a marketing budget for the year or for the plan period, however you dole that out, and stick to it. It gives you that out when people approach you for participating in different options, for advertising in this local, the football program, or advertising here, that you can say, we don't have that budgeted for this year, but please provide the information and we will put that in the pool and consider it for next year. I think it's a tool for you as a business owner to mentally be able to say that and to keep your budget in line, that it's not something you're constantly having to look back on. I think one of the biggest mistakes small business owners make with their marketing is trying to do it as it comes. You have no idea what it is, what you're working on. It makes it really, really difficult to focus. I think one of the things Cheryl and I really talked about in detail when we were working through this session was taking those channels and really coming up with goals for the channel. So we'll go into that next, about how to stay focused and make it manageable, especially when you are busy running your business. You don't want to be busy running your marketing. This slide just talks a little bit more about, they call it guerrilla marketing, so budget conscious mediums. It's not something that you necessarily pay to participate in. Maybe it's just something that it makes sense for your business and it's fun and it gets noticed. But budget conscious mediums tend to be direct sales. You'll see a lot of direct sales companies because that is the best way to keep your budget in mind. Industry specific events, viral and social media, like we talked about before, that some of it is free, some of it is low cost, some of it just is, it can be a headache though if it's not done in a controlled manner. The website has become extremely affordable. 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't do an affordable website, so it was hard for businesses. However, there's so many online and web-based solutions now that are very user-friendly that make websites very easy to get launched and to manage. Community organizations and events, as well as networking events, are always good to get out and talking to people. You know, the old standby business cards are great. Guerrilla marketing, which is kind of like street teams and flyers and handing stuff out. I like to use the little sewer grate as an example, that somebody just went out and, you know, spray painted their letters there, and I thought that was kind of a fun thing that people would notice. And then creative packaging, which I do think is an interesting thing for the ag industry, to have the reusable totes or creative packaging or something that people will utilize outside of your product or service that gets noticed and becomes a talking point for other people. This one just shows a couple visual examples of local companies that have some great budget conscious marketing. I like to use the Turkey Hill Gelato, or I think it was Duetto, came out about 10 or 11 years ago, and what they did is they took some of their cows that they already had them painted, they put them on these trailers and took them to different events throughout the region. So this one specifically was in front of the farm show because they launched it there and gave out samples, but they literally put these behind trucks and drove them around and placed them places that they were giving out samples, and I think it got some great conversation going for their product launch. We have an example of Little Peace Farm and their Instagram feed. They do a great job really showcasing what they do across the board. They showcase a lot of their produce, as you can see. They take pictures when they're at events. They take pictures. They really welcome when restaurants utilize their produce to show pictures of the meals that they come up with. They take pictures of themselves and their family, and they really do a great job with Instagram and get people involved in their not only their product but their farm life and their family. The bottom one is an example of a Pinterest page from Lancaster Farm Fresh Cooperative. So this is a couple different farms that actually can submit to the different boards for their Pinterest. So they have, CSA options there. They do boards for different produce and recipes and some ideas for different seasonal cooking. It's a really cool looking Pinterest page if anybody wants to check that out and kind of see how they utilize Pinterest. Now, the one caveat that I like to mention for small businesses with social media is that you are not expected to do it all and do it well. I like to suggest that small businesses really focus on one social media that showcases their product or service and interacts with their consumers really well. And then if you want to utilize other ones, you can cross-post. You can certainly cross-post within some of the media outlets. You can also utilize software that helps you when you post. Say you really focus on Instagram because it's an image heavy. You don't have a lot of words that you want to associate it with. You're not linking externally. It's not recipes, anything like that, that you just want to focus on the image and kind of the feel good of that. And then it can cross-post to if you do have a Facebook page, or if you want to really focus on Pinterest with some of the recipes and use images there, you can cross-post onto Facebook as well, and it'll link to your Pinterest page. So these are just some local examples that I found just perusing, and you're welcome to look at those ones and other ones for examples. After you have outlined the 4 P's that we went through for your plan, the next biggest piece is going to be the objectives section, outlining measurable goals that your business would like to achieve over the period of time that you have outlined. As I mentioned, an annual plan works out very well for existing businesses. It allows you enough time to really execute a plan, get feedback, and come back to the board next year and do it all over again. And really setting, I like to tell people to set 3 goals that hit on different aspects of your business and that are easily measured. They should not be subjective, like, we would like to grow our business. There is no way at the end of the year for you to sit down and say, well, did we grow our business? Well, yeah, and it's a little too subjective. So I like to say really specific, measurable goals that you can come back to the board and say, did we do this? Did the channels that we outlined and the tactics and the messaging get done what we really wanted to get done this year? So for example, a prospective new urban farm may say, we want to partner with at least 3 local restaurants as a produce supplier. We want to host 2 public events on site at our farm. And we really want to focus on Pinterest as our marketing tool and create at least 5 separate boards on that Pinterest page. From those objectives, we can go to the channels, do our marketing, and really focus on trying to hit these 3 goals. And at the end of the year, we can come back and say, did we pick the right channels and do the right messaging to hit these goals? I don't want anybody to be discouraged if they don't hit the goals, but that is always what you're working towards. If you can come back and say, we did this, we got 5 local restaurants, but we only hosted 1 public event on site. So even though we didn't hit it, we did 1 because maybe it was a lot of time and effort to host, and it just wasn't feasible to do 2. So you can kind of come back to the drawing board the following year and say, we'd really like to continue hosting this 1 event. So we're going to do that 1 event, we're going to take that goal out and add something new in here. And that's where we talked a little bit about the touch points, going back to the drawing board and picking from some of those options to really expand and build and improve year to year. That's really what these plans are meant to do, is to give you a baseline for growing and for accountability for yourself and as a business owner. Another attachment that was provided before this presentation was a little list called Brand Top 10. This isn't something you need to do, it's just something for reference. I like to outline this because some people don't quite understand why they need to really outline and structure their brand, and why having a brand that has an emotional appeal is important. So I like to give everybody this just as a way to kind of point out, like, the touch points and materials need to accurately represent your brand and your message, because the recognition of that brand is what's going to create loyal customers, repeat customers, and, you know, to attract new ones. So the goal of every campaign is to have your customers and potential customers recognize your brand over any individual product or service. The one example I like to use for this is Band-Aid. Band-Aid has done such a good job over, you know, decades, that no matter what adhesive bandage, you know, is in front of you, you're going to call it a Band-Aid. Now, obviously they have Band-Aids, but they have first aid products across the board. They don't just have Band-Aids. So Band-Aid is a brand. It represents, you know, healing and security, but it doesn't necessarily represent any specific product anymore. So this top 10 just kind of talks about appearing legitimate and established and top of mind with consumers. So it's just something to reference. Excuse me. The next one is just some general tips. This is just something, along with the brand top 10, things to consider when you're doing the marketing plan, and things to just consider on a daily basis as a small business owner. Other general tips and ideas. Obviously, the first one we like to outline is to utilize the resources that are available to you that are a lot of times free. The CRC&D and the SBDC are local resources specific to your industry that are great resources. A lot of times they are free, and they are meant to really help businesses in the area. Shopping your competition, we talked about the competitive analysis and really understanding where your product falls in the marketplace. Focusing on customer service and employee satisfaction. I always highlight this because there's the old adage that keeping customers is far less expensive than attaining new ones. If you're constantly going after new ones and losing old ones, you will never stay in business. So it is really important to get in front of your customers, have good customer service, have happy employees, and that is the best way to thrive. Collecting feedback is a great way to do that. Getting feedback from your customers, it may not be something you notice, but if it's something they can kind of point out and you can work on, it's a great way to do it. Learning their names and talking and networking is just always good practice. Carrying your business cards, following up on efforts and calling people back, staying in touch with former customers because you never know when they will circle back, and then joining your local chamber of commerce is always good for networking with other businesses and finding out of opportunities that are local. Coming out of this webinar, we will follow up with some materials that you can work on, and with you know, information that you can reach out to us directly for questions. But I definitely want you to go through the 4 Ps and define your product or service, work through that touch points handout and really come up with some options for your channels, and then utilize all that information to complete a draft of a marketing plan. We have a template that is available when we follow up. If it's something you do want to pursue putting the plan together, we can send you the template. We are happy to work with you individually to complete that in some of the more complex pieces of that, like the competitive analysis and the return on investments. But things you can absolutely do on your own in the excuse me, off season is, or during the busy season and into your off season, is collecting feedback and input from your consumers, developing this plan in the off season, and finalizing it for execution before your busy season starts up again. Is definitely something to strive towards. And the biggest piece is also to create a manageable plan, is to set a day and time aside each week to work on those marketing tasks that you outline in your plan in a manageable way. Maybe that is every Monday at 3 o'clock for a half hour, you follow up on these marketing tasks. Maybe it is posting on your social media page, that's what you want to do every Monday. Maybe it is following up on emails or website inquiries. Maybe it is reaching out to coordinate events. Maybe it is reaching out to new restaurants to be suppliers. Whatever your tasks that are outlined in your plan are, there should be a time and day each week that you always work on it. Put it on your calendar, make it a standing appointment. Nothing gets booked over top of it. If it is something that you can do in a manageable way and it is always on there, it will get done. If it's something that you don't ever plan to do, it will always be something it is not done. It will be something you will make time for soon, but you don't have time for it now. So I always suggest, even if it is a half hour once a week, that is so important to have on your calendar. So at this point in the webinar, we are going to open it back up for discussion. If you have questions coming out of the anything we talked about, if you have another topic you want me to try to talk through, I'm happy to do that as well. Or if you just want to ask for more information in the follow-up, we'll open it up now and happy to discuss anything that you guys would like.
And if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. If you've put yourself on mute after the last unmute, you'll need to unmute yourself to be able to speak directly to Laura, or you can always type in your question in the questions box. Oop, and we have a hand up. Linda. And
okay, try that. Is that better?
There we go.
Hello?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Go ahead.
How does one go about scheduling an appointment with your group at Shippensburg? Or is that not the appropriate way to go?
Oh, absolutely. If you go to the link that is on the SBDC slide, or you can, it's ship.edu/SBDC. That will take you to the web page that has the information about the center. And there's a contact page on there that you can certainly call or email. You're welcome to email me directly. That'll be in the follow-up email that you have. And you can set up a time to meet, do a consulting session, or if you just have questions, you can contact them anytime. There's 3 consultants at the center. I work with people specifically to do marketing planning, but the other 2 do a lot of general like business and financial consulting. But if it's something you want to work directly on a marketing plan, just give them a call or shoot them an email and let them know to connect with me.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Linda. Penny? Go ahead, Penny. No? If I miss anybody, please let me know. Are there any other questions?
If you guys have questions following up or want to ask anything to either Cheryl or myself individually, we will follow up and provide both of our contact information and the materials that we talked about throughout the thing with the marketing plan template. There will be a follow-up survey, and then if there's anything that you want to work through individually, the competitive analysis, return on investment, or just working on the plan together, we're happy to do that as well. Feel free to reach out to us directly. Happy to do so.
And there is a question that was in the questions box here. And Laura, yes, I believe this is for you, but also for those listening, if there's something that you can answer here. Which avenue of social media has been most successful for small family farms?
Small family farms. So I would say in general, it's hard to say which one's most successful. It depends what your goals are with that media. So if you are really looking for, some people just really want traffic and visual, you know, that's where the Pinterest and the Instagram come into play. If you're really looking for interaction, for feedback from customers, for people to share the information, to pass it on, Facebook comes into play. All of them can be extremely time consuming if you don't have a focus. If you have no idea why you're utilizing it, if you're just utilizing it and posting because somebody told you to, it can get overwhelming and then you end up not doing it. So like I said before, I think it's really good to have an idea of why you're using it and the goal for using it. If the goal is really to reach new customers to sign up for a CSA, if it is to get customers to your events, I think Facebook is a great place to have events and people be able to say they're attending and ask questions for that. If you're really looking for them to interact just on a brand standpoint, you know, some of the more image heavy ones, Instagram comes into play. I know some of the restaurants utilize that to get people to see it and it looks good and they want to come in. So it's hard. I don't want to answer which one's the most effective. It really depends on what you're trying to use it for. Each social media has something that it's really good at doing, but there's also ones that are really, I mean, Facebook is obviously the first one people think of, but people's Facebook feeds are so inundated now. You really want to make sure that your message is focused. When it gets to them, it shouldn't be a general like, hey, this is what we're doing. It really should be some sort of call to action, whereas Instagram is more that, hey, this is what we're doing, and you don't necessarily link to anything. Pinterest really is a sharing board. It's an idea board. It's great for recipes and showing if you have different types of produce that you really want to showcase, that might be a great place to do it. So if you have an idea of what you're trying to do with social media in mind, I can certainly steer you towards what might be the most effective for what you're trying to do. So that might be a very general answer, but if anybody wants to chime in on that and maybe share what success they've had with social media, I really encourage you to do so.
Well, and you know, and I'll challenge, so anybody that's found something successful, perhaps in the post-webinar survey, if you might just jot something down, and then we can send that out to the group when we send a follow-up email. Because I'm sure there's different things that you've tried, maybe not just in small farm business, but if you have another type of business, or a spouse or a friend has a small business that maybe has some of the similar situations, you know, we might be able to pull from those examples as well. And Laura, there is another question here. How important is it to create a website for a small family farm? And that's from Michael.
Well, I would say to have a web presence, that if somebody is curious about your brand and they type it into Google, and this is a good exercise, I think, for anybody to do, type it into Google and see what shows up. Even if it's not an interactive website with a lot of content, I would at least have the domain name secured and some sort of static page up there, because the last thing you want is for somebody to Google your name or your farm and somebody else's farm or somebody else's information to show up there. I think you're missing out on a big audience there. So that's a good exercise for anybody. Google your business name or what somebody might search for your business name and see what comes up. And if you don't like what you see, then that's when you do something about it. If it's something you have a website up and it's really just informational, or it forwards somebody to, if you do a lot of Facebook or do something else, it forwards them there, that's totally fine. You just want to make sure you're capitalizing on a web audience that's specifically looking for you, or something that you know, your business is like. You don't want to miss out on that completely. Do I think the website is an end-all be-all? Absolutely not, but it is, in our day and age, the first place that people tend to go for information, even if it is a, you know, Google listing, a Google business listing, and you show up there, that's fine. You just want to make sure that you are visible on that end. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you spend a lot of time or money or effort on. It's more just making sure you're covering your bases at that point.
And I believe a follow-up question to this was posed. Are there any low-cost sources for creating a logo for a small farm?
Yes, reach out to the SBDC. We're happy to give you some resources for that. We also have some interns that tend to love to do design work that would be happy to put together some logo options for you. There are some online places, but we don't necessarily suggest them because they're not, I don't know where they're sourced from or what they do. So I would start with the SBDC, and if we don't have interns that are available to do some of the design work, then we will forward you to resources that can.
And, let's see here. What is the best provider to use to have an online store? And there's some additional, and then we can review them. What is the best pay cart, PayPal, and cost of provider is always important to consider.
Yes, so a lot of the web-based solutions that are available now also have e-commerce options. So they have shopping cart options attached to them. Some people like to use Wix.com. Some people like to use Squarespace. Some people really like, there's a couple different vendors like that. All of them have e-commerce options attached to them, and then you can utilize your own checkout. So PayPal is obviously a widely used and available and inexpensive one. Some people use authorize.net if it's something that you're doing purchases at, you know, a market or a vendor. Some people use the Square, is it Square Reader, the one that you can swipe? They all have swipe cards too.
Yeah.
All three of those are very, you know, cost-effective, trustworthy sources. I would always be wary of somebody you haven't heard of before because you're trusting not only your information but your consumers' information. But any of those web-based solutions that handle your website that have an e-commerce piece attached, GoDaddy and WordPress do it as well. They're a little bit more complex, but they'll have e-commerce options, and they may be, you know, $12 or $15 a month to utilize that service, and then there's a credit card transaction fee. So if you have questions about specific ones, you can certainly follow up with us. That's kind of a general answer, but those are all very trustworthy ones.
I hope that's helpful there. And then Michael has an additional question.
Sure.
Any ideas on encouraging customers to visit the farm to purchase our product?
Yes, so I know that can come into play as far as where your location is. I know that a lot of the CSAs are kind of spread out, but they bring their product in closer to people. I think having, I've seen people have success with a steady market day, like knowing like their farm is always open on Saturday mornings from 9 to 12, so that people, even if they can't make it this week, they know they can go any Saturday from 9 to 12. And it's probably something that they are on the farm working anyway, so if people come and they have the stand there, you know, that's great. I think keeping it consistent so people don't show up and you're not open, or don't come because they don't know if you're going to be open. I think having consistent hours, it doesn't have to be a lot, it can be one day a week. Having consistent hours is important. And then a lot of people, I use that example with the urban farm, may have one or two on-site events a year that are like big deals. Farm-to-table dinners, silent auction events, you know, in the field events, the community volunteer day where people come out and pick and become part of the process, and they understand more of what goes into the farm. I think all of that stuff has the potential to be really great customer interaction and great, you get great feedback, and people really get excited about knowing what's going on in your farm and how it operates, and knowing the people that are there, and knowing that what they're getting is coming directly from you. So if it's something you're considering doing a specific event and want to talk through some ideas with us, just let us know. We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. So we're coming close, but we have time maybe for one more question if anybody has anything. While we're waiting to see if anybody does, I'll quickly just offer a reminder that we will have a short survey at the close. I think it pops up once we exit the webinar. We'll send a follow-up email that'll include the documents that Laura referenced during the presentation and any follow-up materials that become about as a result of the survey, or that we identify, you know, based on questions. Sometimes things pop into our minds. If you think of something that you would like to share with the other folks that have participated today, please feel free to email me, and I'll be certain to include that. We will be having additional marketing webinars later in the fall, maybe into early winter, before we all get busy with our meeting season. I'll be sure to email an announcement about those days as they come up. So And there is one more question here. So Michael asks, I'm from New Jersey. Can I use your free service through Shippensburg, SBDC?
So the SBDC, the PA SBDC, there's Pennsylvania programs, but there's a federal program that they have in different states. So I'm not 100% familiar with what types of programs Jersey has, but I can look into that and let you know and see if they have a system of SBDCs as well, or if it's something you want to contact our office. The director can probably point you in the right direction for your specific state. I don't know that we could utilize our resources for a Jersey business only because it's state funding, but they'll be able to direct you either way. So feel free to reach out to them and they'll kind of point you in the right direction.
So Laura, thank you so much again for taking the time this evening to work with us and for being available, in the future as I'm sure questions will come about, and for offering great advice. I know I appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else does as well. So
yes, thank you all, and we look forward to hearing back from you.
And everybody, I hope you have a good night and enjoy the rest of the growing season. Take care.